Happy Friday, guys. Morning, Ray.
Hey, gentlemen. Good morning, or good evening for, almost good evening for Thomas and Steve.
Hi everyone, good day.
Hey, Darren.
Hi.
I mean, guess we should get started because we don't know what to expect here. Unless anyone thinks we should wait a couple minutes, let me just kind of introduce the call and explain the plan. So whoever's watching the recording, hello, this is Runner's first ever open office hours. It's Friday, January 17th. The plan today is just to basically hang out for an hour and chat about anything to do with contributing to the Runner code base, whether that's a new contribution or an existing contribution. We have myself, the engineering manager for the Runner team at GitLab. Currently, we have two of the engineers on the team on the call, Steve and Tomas. Darren Eastman, the product manager, and Ray, working in the advocacy team, I think it's called.
Yeah, community relations team.
Community relations team.
No, close enough. Yep, that's all right. As long as the word community is in there somewhere, that works.
Yeah, it's the community team. Okay.
Yeah.
So right now we don't have anyone else on the call. Like, no, this is an open call, so the link's been shared out a bit on Twitter. It's the first one, so we might not get anyone joining. We have no idea. And so, unless there's anything else anyone else wants to bring up, plan to start with was just to hang out and watch Steve do some live code review on some of the community MRs that we currently have. So why don't we get started with that? If anyone has any questions about anything at any point, whether it's the MR that's coming along that Steve's looking at or something else.
Hey, Pierre, how are you? Yeah, and I think it's worth noting, I hope you guys don't mind sharing, but before Steve gets started, I mean, you guys, dedicate quite a bit of big portion of your time, looking at community contributions on the Runner team. I think you had a pretty ambitious goal of 15 to 20%, if not more, that people like Tomas and Steve are looking at community contribution. I know there's a lot of contributions coming in and backlog builds up sometimes, but I think that's helpful in terms of context. So.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for calling that out. We do have a huge backlog that frankly is just not in the state where we wish it was. We've all contributed to open source projects. We know how frustrating it is when you don't get a response or nothing happens with it for a while. That is the state with many of our community MRs right now. The team, everyone on the team has a goal of spending 20% of every week reviewing community MRs. Obviously, there's some fluctuation with that, where unpredictable things happen, but as a trend, we're pretty much there. So, for instance, Steve pretty much dedicates his entire Friday to doing that. Yeah, one of the actual goals of doing this was to try and help with that process in some kind of more long-term strategic way. If we can answer questions before someone writes the code, that's probably going to save everyone time, not just ourselves on the review, but also that person contributing. But also give people a kind of insight and a window into what goes into these reviews and how the things we look for, and to try and speed things up in that way if possible. Plus, I think it's just going to be super fun. So there's that.
Yeah, so maybe I should get started, but I was going to work on one of our help chart community contributions that I've been reviewing from time to time, which is adding node toleration. But I see that Pierre is in the call, and I know he has a MR and the GitLab runner code base. So do you want to take a look at it together, Pierre, and see if it's a good idea to go ahead with it or not?
Yeah, I think the best way would be to review the MR from people that are in this call, so that it's easier for you to understand what I or other people are willing were willing to implement when they did that. And yeah, there is only me from the community for this call.
So let's do that and see how it goes. So
Okay.
find your merge request, and I'll share my screen so we can go ahead. Can everyone see my screen?
Yeah.
So I did take a look at this. So can you maybe run me down like what it's doing and why it's like, if we merge this in, what problem is it going to solve?
Yeah, maybe the context of what I am trying to do is to enable Windows on Docker. Docker on Windows. So I've been working on this. Docker on Windows is the fact to run Windows container with Docker. And because in my company, we have a lot of Windows-based CI. And we are struggling a lot maintaining the virtual machine templates. So we have like dozens of tools installed in our VMs, installed manually with the setup click next. And so we try to industrialize that, and we think that the best way to industrialize that is to go with Docker. And so this is the first thing that we are trying to do. And the second thing is we are trying to have the same CI with Windows Docker and with Linux Docker. And the best way we think is to have the same shell and the same GitLab CI.yml for Windows and Linux. So that means the smallest common denominator is to use bash. And so we are trying to use bash with Windows. We have other merge requests trying to use bash for Windows, but with a shell executor. And we didn't want to invest that much into that one because shell executor is not very good, and so we would prefer to go straight to the Docker. And so this is the whole concept, which is quite long to describe in a MR description.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. And so basically what I'm trying to do is this, in this MR is to enable the fact that we can use bash in Docker on Windows. At the moment, on Docker on Windows, it's hard-coded that you use PowerShell. And so I looked at why it was hard-coded and how it is possible to make that configurable.
Okay, and so if I understand correctly, basically you want to run bash on Windows, right?
Yep.
And how is bash going to be installed on Windows?
So what you have to do is to just install it inside the Docker. There is several versions of bash you can install. There is a Cygwin, MSys, and Git for Windows. So with the Git for Windows, you have a version of bash that is with it, which is actually a stripped down version of MSys.
Okay.
So yes, you have to have bash in the path of your Docker image in order for that to work.
Okay. So for you, best case scenario would be you have a Docker Windows executor, right?
Yep.
And you have a shell and you define it to be bash, and then
Yep.
everything is going to work, right?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So there are a few things to keep in mind.
Thanks for sharing me your token.
This is a local token, so
Okay.
it does not matter at all. So this is the best case scenario for you. So there would be a few things that we would need to do for this, right? Let's open up a small markdown file so we keep track of it. So we would need to update the helper image to support bash, right?
No.
Why not?
Because my pull request makes sure that the helper image is actually hard coding the version of or the shell for the helper. So it says, so if you go to the merge cut again,
Yep.
maybe my Zoom is. I try to figure out how to get my Zoom again. It's very small. How do you do that?
Did you lose the screen share, Pierre?
Yeah, I changed the.
Like if you Command tabbed away.
Yeah, and then
if you click on it in if you're on Mac OS, if you click on it in the dock, it'll come back if it's in full screen.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
That happens to me a lot.
Meanwhile,
sorry about that.
I think I can help a little. Steve, scroll down to the executor docker command .go file. I think this is what Pierre is looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is it this part that you're looking for, Pierre?
Yes, when you define the, yes. So basically here you are saying, no, there is, yeah, this is the second one. So yeah, so executor docker command, it's the one that is by default, and then there is the executor command Windows, which is the one for shell script. So basically, predefined shell is actually the shell for the predefined image, which is also known as the helper image.
Yep.
Okay, I choose predefined because this is whatever there was in the code. Predefined image is how helper image is called in the code. So that's why I use that. And then basically, when you are running the helper image, it will use the shell script info for that is defined in this predefined shell instead of the one with build image.
Okay. But this is still the case that, like, for Windows, it's going to use PowerShell, and for Linux, it's going to use Bash, right? It's not going to use Bash for Windows, right?
Yes, by default. So this is the default.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you override it inside the TOML, this will switch this will switch the shell, but only for the build image and not for the predefined image.
Okay, got it. So here we're having a mixture of running Bash scripts and running PowerShell scripts per job. Okay. So I already see a few problems with that. Well, not problems, let's say concerns, right? So I already have a few concerns with that. both PowerShell and Bash, of course, behave differently. The environment behaves differently. And like, as you said, like to have Windows, Bash installed on Windows, there might be some things that don't work. So there are a few things we need to take in consideration. First thing is if all our scripts will work on Windows when running Bash. Now, I don't like having, the reason I don't like having a mixture of PowerShell scripts and Bash scripts on the same job is it's gonna have a few problems, like maintainability wise. Like we have to keep in mind, oh, is this a Bash script that's running or is this a PowerShell script? And even debugging reason, like did the Bash script run or did the PowerShell script run? That's why we try to keep it with one language per job kind of thing. Is that clear? So for example, I do understand the need for Bash on Windows because that brings like some consolidation. But I don't think it would be a good idea to have one job running both Bash and PowerShell in the same execution environment, just because
it's not the same. It's not the same execution environment. There is two containers.
Yes, yes,
so,
I get.
So it's really not the same script. It's the two different scripts. So that's why it's possible, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is possible, definitely. But maintainability-wise, it's going to be hard to debug. Like if a PowerShell script ran, or if a Bash script ran, or if
why you support both Bash and Windows.
Yes, but right now we do not have anywhere logic-wise. Right now, all our logic expects that one job runs one shell script. Having one job running different shell scripts might cause problems that I cannot think of right now. And even code path, like we need to think of every code path that is possible, and testing-wise might be hard. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying your solution is wrong, but what I would suggest, instead of having just the build script running in Bash, what I would suggest is having everything run in Bash. So as in the config file here, as soon as you define shell bash, for example, we're gonna make it so that everything, like both the pre-clone script, clone scripts, and all that stuff happen in Bash, for example. So we don't have to handle all this extra configuration for the predefined and shell. Because right now we have a predefined shell, and this is adding a new method, this is adding a new code path, a new testing path we need to check. So I do understand and I do agree there might be a need for having Bash running on Windows. And that's something we should investigate, but I don't think having a job running two sets of languages, even if they're on two different environments, two different containers, it can get confusing as a maintainer to see, okay, did this script actually run on PowerShell or did this script run on Bash? And like, we need to take in consideration other things like error handling and things like that, that might not be ideal.
Yeah, so I don't understand because you already have an abstraction on the actual shell that is run on, which is, in my opinion, quite good, and it's really separated. And I haven't seen. I think this is pretty well abstracted, so I haven't seen any code path that could pose issue to have different shell between the predefined the predefined shell job and the rest. Yep. And I have I have this running in my production for like since I have uploaded this, so 4 months, and this has really been going very well. Yeah. No issue until now.
I understand that, but like we have to keep in consideration it's not just what's at the moment happening in the future as well. Because imagine we have to add, for example, we in the pipeline, down the pipeline, we have PowerShell 6 and PowerShell 7 support. We have to keep, now when we add support to that, now we have to make sure that if a job runs two different sets of scripts, how it's going to work and how it's going to react. So it's an extra thing to think of. Again, I'm not saying that Bash should not run on Windows. I'm saying that if we want to run Bash on Windows, we should do it all the way, not just half of it. Because this one is going to add like, it's here, the predefined shell, for example. The word predefined, right? Predefined is only really well known for the Docker executor, not any other executor. And I know we're not using it anywhere else, right? The word predefined.
So yeah, basically, I introduced that so that I wouldn't have to modify the predefined image, which is already, I think, a bit complicated for Windows. So I didn't want to go that path. I think that Bash is not in the path of the helper. And indeed, it was very complex for me as a non-GitLab to change the helper.
Yep.
So I didn't go that path. Maybe this could be more easy for you as a maintainer to modify the helper to also have the Bash, or actually the Git Bash in the path, executable in the path. I haven't tried it, and I'm not sure how it is easy to do that for me to work on it.
Yeah, that's completely fine, and that's like why we're here, and that's why we dedicate 20% of our time, like to help people like you. Like we do understand that, like one, you don't have unlimited resources, and two, you don't know the code base inside out. That's why I'm telling you all these points we need to keep in mind. So, because yes, we should probably install, update the helper image to support Bash. When shell is configured for Bash, we should define all scripts to be Bash. And then here we would remove this predefined shell mechanism, and we do not introduce any new mechanism. The only mechanism we need to introduce is for the Docker Windows executor to know that do not hard code the PowerShell configuration anymore. So
yeah,
if we,
I think this should already work, because I have tried that already. So if you change the shell to Bash, there is nothing to change in the Go. Because
exactly. So then it would be just a matter of updating the image, right? So
yes,
code change wise, it's much simpler than having this predefined configuration.
Yes, and also to make sure that the Bash Git clone is not only working for Linux, which is already the case, because we are actually using a Bash on Windows, and it's working, it's cloning without issue. So
okay.
it should work.
Okay, so change-wise, that would be a lot simpler, right? Change-wise, it would be just a matter of updating the image, building a new helper image, and then just define the configuration, and hopefully that would be it, right? So maintainability-wise, it's going to be much simpler. And here I see it, what my biggest issue would be with this current code would be that we're leaking an abstraction here. So we're leaking the domain of a predefined. What's a predefined? So a common build is everything. Every executor depends on common build, right? So as soon as we are leaking the predefined, in this case, for example, the Kubernetes executor, the VirtualBox executor will have access to what's called a predefined shell in this case. So it might not be ideal, and it might cause some confusion for someone who's coming new to the code base. So having the helper image just support bash out of the box would be easier, because then the user just has to define shell equals bash and it would work automatically. And as a maintainer, like me and Tomas and Georgie, it would not be an extra code path that we have to think about. It would be just an extra system that we have to support, an extra software that we have to install on our helper image. So even code-wise, it would be much, much simpler. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I have another thing. So in the overview, there is another. So there is actually the reverse use case. So there is 4021 and 4725. Yes, so there is also people that are trying to run PowerShell on Linux.
PowerShell on Linux. Yes, I do know we have an issue to support that.
It's pointed. It is the second, your fourth tab.
Support PowerShell. Oh yeah. Okay. Why did
it has been closed.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I understand now why it has been closed, because we started to work on PowerShell 6 support, and PowerShell 6 support means that PowerShell would automatically work on Linux, right?
So that means you have PowerShell in the helper image for Linux?
Not yet, but that's a good point, for example. We do not have PowerShell installed on our Linux environments. And probably if we want to do that, we would have to install it manually. But yeah, that's another, for example, follow-up issue, or it can be part of this issue. But this issue would be just adding support for PowerShell 6. And then I would say we would have another issue for adding PowerShell to the helper images, either to the existing one or creating a new helper image. That's why I would like to have it on a separate issue, so we can discuss the technical details for that, like what would be the benefits of having it in the same image or in a different image. Because the fun part about the helper image is we start that image on and off multiple times per job, like 3 or 4 times per job. So the bigger the image is, the slower it's gonna be, right?
Exactly.
So if we probably have 2 separate images, it might be worth, just because it depends how big PowerShell is. Like, I do not know any details on that. So that's something we would have to investigate. And that's why I would say on a separate issue, on a separate thread, than adding support for PowerShell 6. Does that make sense?
Makes sense. So it was just, so this ML was capable of doing 2 in 1. And then we can also select different predefined image according to the shell that is configured by the user. Or you can put both shell. Maybe so we have PowerShell, PowerShell 6, Bash, and I think that's it. The 3 shells that are supported. So maybe we don't want 3. Multiply the number of image by 3.
Yep.
So that's your. So now, how can I help to make a Bash capable image?
So I imagine you have a Windows environment, right?
Yeah.
So one thing I would start look at is how we're building the helper images. So the helper images are built under Docker files. No, not CI, sorry. Build. And then we have these helper images, one for Windows 1803 and Windows 1809. So let's go to Windows 1809, for example. And we have this. And this is our helper image that we distribute to Docker Hub. So let me actually do this. Let me go to the runner repository, master, and open up the repo and start my development environment for Windows. So for us to add bash support, we would have to change this Docker file, right? We're gonna have. Sorry.
Yeah, basically it's just you just need to add C program file git command. You need to add a bin because the bash executable is in git bin. I have to verify that, but
okay. So when we download Git, do you mean we have bash automatically?
Yes.
Okay.
You know, Git is required. There is a lot of Git that is implemented in Bash. So Git itself is actually spawning Bash in a number of commands. So it's there.
Okay. Give me a sec. I'll stop sharing my screen for a sec to enter the password. I'm just opening up my RTP program so I can log into the machine. It's not prompting for the password. I'm not sure why this is not working. Ah, there we go. So let me share my screen again. So I'm going to start. Is this font too small? Should I make it bigger?
It's hard to read.
Yeah. Let me try and make it bigger. Is this better? Right?
That's good. It's okay for me.
So, for example, let's go. So all this, we do have a vagrant box for the runner, and we do have this documented in docs, GitLab runner developments. Okay. Yeah, there we go. And then we have Windows, developing Windows on non-Windows environment. So this one explains how to use our vagrant box and some environment variables and things like that. So we have the runner directory here. Now I might have the helper image built already, and I do not. So I would need to build it manually, but I would have to do that. We have a script to do this. So if you look at CI builds and release Windows images. So we have this script. This is something you would have to do on your environment as well to build it locally and to test it locally. We have specific environment variables that we have to set to build the image. So for example, here we're setting the Git version, the build, the checksum, LFS checksum, and so on and so forth. And then it will go around and build everything. So it will automatically pull the Git versions. Now, I know we are not using the official Git one. We're using what we call Git for Windows.
Yeah, okay. Okay. So this is the official one for Windows.
Yeah, exactly. The fork. Sorry about that. So does that install Bash as well?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. So let's try and build the image, and we'll go from there. How does that sound?
So basically, you can just edit here you change command. So /git/command by /git/bin. Here,
Okay.
and this will work. No need to add a new path because you have everything in command. You only have git, and
Okay, got it.
in bin you have git plus bash.
Okay, okay. So it would be just a matter of this change, and I will have both bash and git installed. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. I did not know that. So let's try it out and build the Docker image. I just need to remember how to set an environment variable in PowerShell. I know it's with the set item commandlet, but I don't remember the syntax. So set item path. So to use our script, as I said, we have to define all these environment variables, the versions, the checksums, and so on and so forth. So item. I usually have it in my PowerShell script, but I recently destroyed it to fix some issues. So I have to redo them.
There is a typo in version.
Yeah. Env get version. And
You have a typo in version. I think it's the problem of the comment. It needs a I. It's version.
Version. Yeah. Oh, that might be a misspell from my get version. Yeah, that's a misspell in the documentation.
Okay.
Good catch. That's something we can fix, yeah, on a separate merge request. So we have get version, and we need to get the get version from our GitLab repo, which we can go here, go to releases, for example. Let me make it bigger. And for example, 2.25, right? So let's take 2.50 and set it. So if we do an echo of env get version, you should see it here. Now let's look at what's the next one. So version build, just because from when we're looking at this, there might be a different build in the URL. So this is one, we want one. No. Next one will be the checksum. So we make sure we download the correct one. We get that from GitHub as well. And we're trying to install which one are we trying to install? I think the exe. Let's look at the helper image. And here we do an invoke web request, git version Windows. So we're trying to install the min-git one. So min-git, is it the dubs? Yeah, that's it. So we're trying to install basically this one. So this is the shop we need to put here. Now we need to define the GitLab version as well.
Yeah, the thing is, I'm not using min-git. I have doubts that the full version of Bash is in it.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't remember why we installed min-git. I think it was just Git itself. So that's what we wanted back then.
Yeah.
But let's try and see what installs for us, and then we can change it if we want to at some point. So the LFS version. So Git LFS. Let's try and take a look at it here. I always look at the release page for this kind of stuff just because they have all the checksums and all the information. So,
Yeah, so here I can see that additionally non-critical packages such as Git Bash, Git GUI, and Perl are excluded from minimal Git. So I'm not sure if they are talking about Git Bash. So in Git Bash, you have two executable. You have the Git Bash, which is actually starting, a window with the MSys2 terminal, and then running bash.exe instead of that. So this is called git bash.exe. And then you have bash.exe, which is actually the GNU bash compiled for Windows. So I never verified if what is stated is in the NuGet package is they removed git bash or they removed the full bash. But I don't think that Git will actually work without bash.
let's verify it. So I just went on Docker Hub and I'm downloading the latest helper image that we built for Windows, and I'm just gonna run it locally, and we'll look at the directory to see what's being installed first. Does that make sense?
Okay, I can speed this up a little. I just downloaded both archives from the release page, and min-git doesn't contain bash, but git in the tar bz2 archive does contain the bin directory, and in the bin directory you have bash, sh, and git.
Okay,
so we could try to switch to the git to 25 tar bz2, but we need to find out how to unpack it on Windows.
Yeah. So if you want to continue, I'm not sure how we're doing on time, but if you want to continue, let me cancel this. If you want to continue contributing, what you have to do is basically update this file. So we download the full Git version, unpack it properly, and then expose it. And then we'll run a job using bash shell, and we'll see what actually runs and what doesn't.
So it's okay for you. Also, I see that you download the zip. You download the zip and then unzip it, right?
Yes. So we download the zip. So we're doing an expand archive here to.
So this method doesn't set the registry file that are usually needed. So it's usually better to just use the setup.exe. I don't know if you're fine with that. That's okay if you don't have.
I mean, if that works, yes. But does the setup.exe work when there's no like terminal available?
Yeah. I have spent a lot of time making it work, so I have the exact method to make it work in console mode. But actually, which is interesting is that in Windows, even if you are using Docker, there is a minimal UI that is like off screen. And I was when running all my Dockers on Windows experimentation, I really fear that I had more issue with the UI, and actually this is often quite working well. Even if there is a window that is open, it will work. Windows will say, okay, I open a window off screen, no problem. The only thing that doesn't work is if some Windows is actually requiring somebody to click on a button, then that doesn't work. But except for that, it's actually running quite well.
Okay. Okay, nice. I did not know that. Thank you.
So yeah, if you want, I can help on the incantation to run the git setup exe. It's actually quite simple.
Okay.
I can do it in the same MR, or I can do it in another MR.
Yeah. So regarding the original amount, this one. No, not this one. This is an issue. This one. I would say, I'm not sure if you agree with this, but let's say having this predefined shell is not ideal. So I would say we close this merge request, and then we open a new one that will update the helper image to add support for bash, and then we'll go ahead with that one and see how that works. How does that sound?
Of course, yeah, obviously.
Awesome. So yeah, I think this was really helpful because one, I was having a hard time understanding why we needed this MR, and two, if it took me 6 months to get to this and then decline it, or explain to you why it's not ideal, that would have been very frustrating for both me and you.
It already took 3 months, so
yeah, exactly. So I'm glad we did this, and I think we do have a good plan. So I will write an explanation here of what we are gonna do. Now the real question comes in is, do we actually want to support bash on Windows? From your experience, how different is bash on Windows? And I know we have some, so I've been talking to one of our solutions architect, for example, that's been working with some customers that want to run our SAST scripts on Windows, right? And one way,
I didn't get the SAST.
Yeah, so we have some SAST scripts from the secure stage of our product that will just run some checks on your application, static analysis checks on your application.
Static analysis, okay.
Yeah. And this is all done with bash scripts. Basically, the CI job is just running a bash script. And the way they made it work is using WSL instead of git bash. So I would say, from you as an experienced Windows developer, would bash be better on WSL, or would it be better on using git for bash?
So there is it's indeed quite complicated, and we spend a lot of time experimenting with that. There are actually, like I said in the beginning, 3 versions, actually 4 with WSL, which we didn't actually try in the CI. So there is Cygwin. So Cygwin is the most ancient version of Bash, and Cygwin is based on it's actually re-implementing POSIX API on top of Windows. And this has a lot of issues, especially for fork. So in Unix, you have the fork syscall, and this syscall has no equivalent in Windows. In Windows, you have something like read process, which is the equivalent of fork plus exec. And so the fork semantic, it's supposed to duplicate the process and then have the exact same, memory. The memory is shared and copy and write. And so there is not at all such kind of thing in Windows. So they need to do quite hack, which is long. They duplicate all the pages, very complicated stuff, and it doesn't work flawlessly. Sometimes due to, you have to have the same page and exactly at the same place in the virtual memory. So it's very difficult, and sometimes it just doesn't work because you have some DLL trick. I don't know exactly, but sometimes the fork will not work. So we have been experimenting this, and especially with Git, we actually don't so on some project on Windows, we don't use the helper scripts. We are using custom Git script to fetch our submodules, and we are seeing a lot of instability with this, which were related to the fact that Bash on Git, the Git version in Cygwin was actually running the Bash Cygwin, which is the Cygwin version of Bash, and which is not reliable to fork. So this is Cygwin, don't use it. There is MSys2, and MSys2 is same as Cygwin, the fact to try to compile and use as much as possible of the Unix tools on Windows. But the difference is that they actually run, they compile as much as possible the Windows version of the tools. So this Windows version will not use the POSIX emulation, but directly use the Windows system call. So those tools have a bunch of, DS-define, sharp-define Windows, then if def Windows, then you call Windows, and else you call the POSIX. So basically, MSys, so Bash on MSys is that, and it's much better, and it's reliable, and there is no issue. So the Bash that is provided in Git for Windows is they actually take the MSys version of Bash and they include whatever is strictly necessary for running just the Git scripts. So this for us has been running quite well. Since we switched to that, we don't have any more reliability issue. And then the WSL, the issue with this is it's really Linux emulation layer, and so you're not really in the same file system. And so for me, it's a bit too dangerous to use that. And in my experimentation, it has been quite slow, especially when you have to, make stuff in the two environments. So WSL is good if you want to develop some Linux thing on Windows. So it's better than Docker because you don't have the VM emulation. So when it works, it's faster. But I think it's better to just use MSys for running those Bash scripts. And if it works with Git for Windows, then that is best. So on Git for Windows, what you don't have is some tools that are not needed for running Git. The first one that come in mind that has been missing for some of our people is find. You don't have a find inside Git Bash, so if your Bash scripts are using find, so then you need to install MSys, the real version.
Okay, as far as I know, we're not using that command, but we'd have to check, of course.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, would it be simpler for you, for example, or better for you to, instead of doing support for Bash, we support PowerShell 6, and for example, just use PowerShell 6 both for Windows and Linux? So instead of going the other way around.
The thing is, for now we have been working for 2 years with the CI, so we have a lot of Bash scripts, and so people won't rewrite their Bash CI into PowerShell, that's for sure.
Okay.
We have extremely complex CI that they don't want to write in PowerShell. Yeah,
I think that makes sense. So I would say, since we're almost close on time, I would say ways forward would be having, probably the first step would be having an issue to support Bash on Docker on Docker executor.
Yeah, we have this one.
We have it.
That's the first one that.
Yeah, support Bash on Windows. Yeah, you're right. Yes. So we have this. Okay, you already followed this perfectly. Awesome. And then we will close the old other MAR and we'll open a new one to have the helper image download the full Git version and export the correct path, and then we'll run bash on the Windows containers, hopefully. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah.
Awesome.
Let's try that. I will try to work on it in the next few weeks, and we'll see how it works.
Awesome.
Cool.
If you get stuck on it, like for example, how to build the image or anything like that, just don't be afraid to like open up a work in progress on Mar and ping me on that merge request and tell me, like, for example, this command is failing for X reason. Just give me the log and I'll take a look at it.
Yeah. Basically, I just need to clone the environment on Windows, and I start the Docker build from there. Actually, my workflow is to run the Docker build directly on the Mac, which works, which has been working for me and much faster. I don't know if you have this workflow as well. Did you try to directly point, you Docker, you say Docker build -h and then your Windows machine? Did you try this workflow to build the Docker?
Can you explain it to me again? Sorry.
So when you do Docker build, you can say Docker build -h, and so you point your Docker client to the Windows machine. So
yes.
It's much easier. You don't have to edit on Windows and so on. You can just edit your files on your Mac, and then you run it. So
you could do that for sure, but I have it on my VM, and my VM has a shared drive on my Mac, so it's the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't actually expose the Docker daemon from my Windows VM, because then I would have just to set that all up. So setting an NFS drive on my VM was much simpler for me. But
okay.
Because Vagrant does that with just one line.
I see. All right.
But yeah, that's a good idea as well.
So thanks.
No, thank you. That was really helpful and really fun for me. Anyways.
Okay, good. So hopefully we can do that again, and hopefully next time we have more people so that.
I was going to suggest, in about a month from now, we have the hackathon that runs on Wednesday and Thursday. Like Thursday, same time, 8 a.m. or even an hour earlier. I don't know, Elliot, you're going to like that a whole lot, but we could talk about this over Slack, but we might get more people to join during the hackathon. So.
Yeah, I was going to, I just looked at that too. I forgot that it was Wednesday, Thursday, but I think doing one during the hackathon would be super awesome. And kind of talk about it with the team about if would Thursday work better actually during the hackathon, you think, like in the middle of the hackathon, or do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. Either Wednesday or Thursday, should work. So
okay. We'll explore that.
We'll figure it out. We'll figure out the logistics on offline on Slack. So.
And then something we haven't figured out is how often to do these. I think I'd initially proposed doing it monthly, and so the hackathon would be.
A month from now. So works pretty well. Yeah.
Well, let's tentatively plan. That'll be the next one. Date and time, exact date and time to be determined. And then any change, we'll talk about on Slack.
During the hackathon, you have 100% of your resources dedicated to helping the contributors? Or how does it work?
I'm sorry, Pierre. I couldn't quite hear that. Like, what was the question on hackathon?
During the hackathon, you have all the people in GitLab helping on the contribution and so on, and so this is how it works.
It's no different. Like a level of, people are certainly aware the hackathon's happening, but even with or without outside of the hackathon, I think engineers like Thomas and Steve does a really good job of supporting MRs, but there's like more attention paid to it over the 2-day period, I guess. But,
okay.
Yeah.
It's just that if we have that, I think I can spread the word in my company and
okay, great.
try to work on this hackathon and to also spend maybe one day discussing with you guys with the most things that we would like to do, but we didn't ever get the chance to actually start working on. And I think really discussion with core developers like live like this. I mean, we have made huge progress just by just talking. So
Yeah, I can send you more
very good.
info on the hackathon via email, Pierre, and then yeah, we can go from there. So,
Good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone.
Right.
I will post this recording to our YouTube playlist, and Ray, I'll pass you the link, and if you want to share it out a bit more too.
Right.
Do that.
Cool. Thanks everyone. Have a good weekend.
Good.
Thanks.
Bye bye.
you.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Till next
Bye.
time.